what is something that every single person just hates? Can't stand them.
The IRS.
Well, the answer is pedophiles. So
I was going to say that next.
That's what we're going to be talking about today. We're talking about Dateline NBC's To Catch a Predator.
Yeah, it started off actually about 20 years ago, almost exactly, in 2004. It started off as a segment of, like you said, the Dateline NBC news channel where they just pick a topic and they spend like about an hour kind of breaking down a topic. Well, this was like a special called Dangerous Web, and it would feature Chris Hansen and everybody. And if you don't know who Chris Hansen is, he's the guy that would confront you in the house and say,
why don't you have a seat right over there?
This would be done after having people work in a sting where they would pretend to be underage people and try to lure predators and pedophiles into conversation and then get them to a sting house, which is where the take a seat would occur. Mm-hmm. And it was so popular that it became a continued segment.
I believe it was the top grossing show for NBC at this time, too.
Yes, and it spawned several spin-offs.
It's actually created a resurgence. It was so popular. There's YouTubers and TikTokers all creating their little version of To Catch a Predator.
Go ahead. Well, I was actually coming out here to pick up a cupcake and then go back home.
If you could guess, Bryant, why do you think we're here? Don't be like this, Bryant. I just have a few questions. I want to know what this picture is of you with the makeup on. Do you recall this picture, Bryant? Why does a 13-year-old girl need to meet a 40-year-old man?
Because I wanted to see if that's what her intentions were.
Hey, Jesus.
Hey, how's it
Yeah,
going?
that's you, right?
Yeah.
Wait, what are you doing here?
Go.
We can talk right here. Hey, is the police are on their way, so I'm just letting you know that. Oh, you wanna leave? You wanna flee the scene?
No,
That's gonna be much worse for you, Jesus. We can talk about this. We're a mediation group. Raphael! Why? Why are you talking to little girls?
Nah, it ain't like that.
Yeah, you can definitely also see it in the zeitgeist of American pop culture. It's referenced in South Park quite a bit.
I'm afraid I can't do the show.
Why don't you have a seat?
Family Guy.
I'm a virgin.
Not a deal breaker. And I should let you know I'm Chris Hansen from To Catch a Predator.
And by that, I just mean, like, generally speaking, if you haven't heard of it, you might be living under a rock.
So, you're old.
Yep.
Like me.
Yeah.
Both old, right?
Mm-hmm.
You remember coming home from a long day of school, hitting up MSN or AOL, talking to the homies?
Yeah, it was AOL is AIM, right?
Yeah.
AOL Instant Messenger.
Oh God, we're dating ourselves
And,
really bad.
I think if you did it right, you could use your phone before text messaging was heavily available.
In these chat rooms, it was rather prevalent for creeps to hit on younger, underage people. And that's kind of what, I guess, bred the idea of To Catch a Predator, was that it was so prevalent online that they just decided this would make good TV if we shined a light on these weirdos.
Yeah, and Dateline worked with a group called Perverted Justice, and that's exactly what they did. They would pose as underage people, and they would hit prevalent chat rooms like AIM, MSN, and essentially they would bait people and then try to get them to initiate sexual conversation with them, at which point they would provide that information to law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And I think by the time To Catch a Predator was done, they had done 12 undercover sting operations, and this was across the entire United States. After the third one, they started involving law enforcement. So the first two, it was just journalism, you know, and they oftentimes they would just let the suspect go. They would provide that information to the police, and then the police would make an arrest later. It wasn't until after the third one where they started to do the busts outside, where they would have police officers on site, and they would work hand in hand with each other.
I think that is my favorite part of the show, watching these. He's like, no, you're free to go whenever. And they're like, oh, really? Okay, yeah. I'm out.
Chris Hansen always took a little bit of pleasure in watching them have that moment of relief just to have it snatched right back up.
Yeah, and it's crazy that all of these people, it was their first time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the general consensus for most of them. Like, I wasn't going to do that. I was just going to, you know, hang out and cuddle.
They're like, what's this black tilta doing in your backpack?
Oh, throwback, yeah.
Excuse me, sir. I'm David Foster from Newsline. Can I ask you a few questions?
Where's Chad? Is this Chad's room?
There is no Chad. We posed as a bro in an internet chat room. Can you explain what you're doing here?
Just gonna watch some DVDs, talk about bands. I was gonna tell Chad how not cool it is to invite bros he meets on the internet to his dorm. It's unsafe.
Can I see your bag?
Yeah, sure.
What's in here, sir?
Nothing.
6-pack Natty Ice.
Get thirsty a lot. I get thirsty.
Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle.
Such an underrated movie. That's totally
Big Black Dildo.
Yeah, no, it's horrible, but it was so entertaining. So obviously it gained popularity, and it was addictive. I remember sitting on the couch watching this for hours.
It coincided with chat rooms becoming a huge place where people could communicate online. So at the advent of the internet, now we're seeing these chat rooms. It just became like a cesspool. So, I mean, it's kind of like...
Almost needed.
Yeah. It was like serendipitous that they started doing this around the same time that this became a problem.
Unfortunately, with dealing with things that are a little controversial like this and a little spicier, you do run into problems. And when you get so big, there's people that want to see your downfall. They just want to see it. And after so many seasons, eventually they do run into a huge problem, which is what people consider the end and what we're going to be breaking down. And we're going to be talking about a bust that ended in a suicide.
Yes, this is the meat of what we're talking about in the episode. This is the final bust or the final sting, and it takes place in Murphy, Texas. And now we got some of this information from a podcast, which is really good. Chris Hansen did it himself. And in the podcast, he talks with an officer that worked for Murphy Police Department during the sting. He acted as the liaison between the police chief and To Catch a Predator. And that one's really good. That's where we got a lot of information. And we also got it from an Esquire article and then Wikipedia. But the way that it essentially goes is that in about July of 2006, Perverted Justice approaches the Murphy Police Department and they want to work together. And so they set up a sting, and then on July 24th, they net a vehicle that belongs to a police official, okay? And at this point, there's potential for this. So they suggest, hey, why don't we hit up To Catch a Predator, and we'll make a bust out of this. We'll make it something bigger than what it is. Because
put him on the news.
Exactly. We're going to put him on the news. And the chief, his name is Billy Myrick. He seizes the opportunity. He thinks this is a great idea, okay? Because he's all about this. And so is this officer, Kevin Carter.
I mean, it's hard not to be about this. I mean, busting pedophiles.
Yeah, it's hard not to. You would think that, but the DA is not on board.
Why is the DA not on board?
Well, I want to say because it's a PR thing. Also, it may be in order to protect who it is that they're busting. This big name, this William Conradt.
What did Lewis Conrad do?
Well, we'll get to that, but he's definitely chit-chatting on the internet.
Oh, no, I'm talking about what is his job title?
Oh, he's an assistant district attorney for Rockwall County. And before that, he was the district attorney for Kaufman from 1980 to 2002. So big name within the Justice Department of this little city/county.
The Justice Department corrupt?
So anyway, the Collin County DA is not on board, and he offers the chief an out. He's like, I'm not gonna say this out loud, but I'm gonna give you an opportunity to not do this. They say screw it. The chief gives Kevin Carter the go ahead, but he has to keep it within Murphy.
And I said, I would like to do this. I said, this Perverted Justice works with law enforcement. They have a proven track record. Here's their link. Here's all of their convictions, everything. I said, this is something we really, I feel, need to address. And he said, give me a couple days and come back and we'll discuss it. So I gave him the allotted amount of time, and he called me back in his office, and he says, police work, everybody goes by the last name. He said, Carter, I want you to do this, but I don't want you to leave Murphy. You can only touch the neighboring cities. Well, Murphy sits right next to Plano, Richardson, Garland, Wiley. So we were a suburb of Dallas. And he said, you can't leave Murphy. I said, okay.
They outfit a house with cameras. They set up a sting house just like they did in all the other operations. And they start using the Perverted Justice actors to start luring people to the house. From there, they start making arrests, using Kevin Carter as the liaison to determine, and this is from the podcast, to determine if they have met the metrics in order to make the arrest. You know what I mean? Did they initiate contact? Did they show up at the house? Et cetera, et cetera.
At least how it seems, they do care about them going to jail. They're not just doing this so much for clout. This isn't so much the clout era. So it's like, I do think they genuinely cared about getting them arrested by the end of this.
Yeah, and they make it clear. I think the podcast was the best source of information because you can really tell that the main goal behind this was to protect the county, to stop these people from doing what they're doing. They mentioned, because there was 25 people that end up, 24 or 25, I'm not 100% sure on that, they end up getting brought to the house. But Perverted Justice claims that they were in contact with 700 people through chat. So, like you said, it's prevalent. It's a cesspool, you know, and you have to meet certain metrics in order to make an arrest. And so that's why he was there for that. So a number of men are lured to the house, and as soon as they enter, they're arrested. But that's not the main suspect that they're after. The whole reason that this sting was set up, right? That's William Conradt Jr. I'm just going to kind of break him down a little bit. We're going to talk about who he was. We already mentioned that he was the assistant district attorney. He was born in 1950. He lived alone all the way till 2006 when the sting occurred. So this is a man that lived alone. For a few weeks before the sting, he was in contact with a perverted justice actor. 2 of them at one point, but a majority of it is with one, the text, right? And they get a confirmation that they set it up for him to meet, right? But then he goes, no contact.
Do you think he got spooked?
That's what your initial thoughts would be, but according to the podcast, Kevin Carter, he says that it's because a family member showed up and spontaneously wanted to go to lunch.
He had committed to coming to the house, and then he went radio silent. We later learned after everything that prior to him leaving his home in Terrell to come to the house, a family member had shown up at his house unannounced and invited him to dinner. And that is the only reason I believe, from what we know now, that he did not show up. I have no doubt in my mind he was coming to that house.
And the family member was who?
I was informed that it was his sister.
When you live alone, like how I mentioned earlier, and you're into this type of thing, your home and your privacy becomes like your castle. And when that's breached, you don't want anybody to know about it. And so when his sister showed up, he shuts everything down. He goes, no contact. And they bring up that that's common behavior.
Almost like they know what they're doing is being shitty.
Almost, yeah. You would think. But it's up to debate whether he knew he was going to be in a sting or whether it was because of the family member. Eventually, on November 4th, they make phone contact with somebody that provides personal information to make it aware or make it seem like that's Bill Conradt, right? And they set up a meet, but when he goes no contact, according to Hansen, Conrad starts to delete MySpace information, okay? And so normally, like in our day and age, you have no way to erase information, right, on the internet.
Right. And for those that don't know, MySpace was Facebook before Facebook.
Absolutely, yeah. I should have provided some context. It was really cool. But he apparently begins deleting content off of the MySpace page, right? And so to them, because these cases hinge so heavily on evidence, and this is 2006, and they bring this up in the podcast, it is possible at this point in time to delete evidence off of your hard drive, to start erasing stuff, getting rid of things. And so in the state of Texas, just the act of communicating the intent of having sex with a minor is enough to have committed a crime.
I guess that's what I like so much about the way the Texas law is written, is the fact that the meeting does not have to occur, so we can still make a case out of that.
Yeehaw, go Texas.
Yeah, and so that evidence is very important, and they're scared now that he's going to get rid of their evidence proving that he did this. This is what everything hinges on. So in order to prevent this loss of evidence, Kevin Carter, who's acting as the liaison between To Catch a Predator Hansen and the Murphy Police Department, he requests an arrest warrant at about 12:30. At around 8:30, the TCAP, the To Catch a Predator crew and Hansen, they show up into the neighborhood and they hang out on the street. They were waiting there at 8:30 in anticipation of the warrant, right? The warrant is approved at 11, but they don't receive it till 2:30. At 2:30, after they get the warrant, they try to knock on the door, try to get him to come out, right? There's no response, but they're pretty sure he's inside. Around 3, a SWAT team shows up, and a little bit after that, they make their way into the home, all right? When they make their way into the home, they split into 2 teams. I think it's the first team that encounters him in the hallway, and he has a small Browning .38 caliber, and he says something along the lines of, they weren't able to quote it, but it's along the lines of, "I'm not going to hurt anybody," before putting the weapon to his head and pulling the trigger.
Before he turned himself into a wood.
He turned himself into a wood. He did live for 60 minutes after that, and then, there's stuff.
I actually did not know that part of it.
Yeah, he lived for 60 minutes, but died from his wounds.
So what actually happened after he got shot?
After he was shot and his life obviously ended, there had been 23 other arrests made. This is where things get a little weird, and we have to talk about like ethics and stuff like that. So the sister does sue Dateline NBC for $105 million, right? And they try to call it entrapment and bring up the fact that they were outside waiting for the warrant. The reason entrapment is so important to this case is because entrapment is if a government official lures you into a situation that you wouldn't come about organically. You know, like if you were never ever going to do that, if they didn't do this to you, it would have never happened. And why that's important is because if it had just been perverted justice, that's not a government agency. That's like third-party journalists, citizens. You know, they're not held to that same standard. It wouldn't be entrapment at that point. But they were working police. Now, what is important to talk about is the text chats. So we talked earlier about that perverted justice would need the suspect to initiate sexual conversation. It helps to keep everything airtight. And they say that in the podcast, nothing is airtight, but that helps get it closer to that, right?
Yeah.
If you look at the text chats, and there's a link to it, Perverted Justice keeps a document, like there's a website where they have every last text chain. Now, while they are perverted, the suspect has to be the one to initiate it. Now, it could be argued because it's like they ask for a pic. The person pretending to be the minor. If they asked for a pic, then they initiated the conversation.
Yeah.
And then there's also phone calls to take into account. They recorded 3 phone calls between William Conradt and the perverted justice actor. And they kind of sit there and talk back and forth. You can tell there's some tension. And then the actor is the one to say, like, did you like those pictures? Or those were some pretty nice pictures. Once they start the ball rolling, it starts rolling. But the suspect, in this case, didn't technically.
Hey, is this Will?
Yeah.
Hey, Will, this is Luke. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
What are you doing?
Nothing. What's going on?
Nothing much.
No?
No. Did you get the dogs walked?
Yes, I did. I sure did. Yeah. They're pretty tough to do, you know?
Well, for $50, just sitting around.
Yeah, I can't complain, you know? So what are you doing?
Not anything. Well, actually, I'm sort of watching a football game, but kind of not also.
Oh, yeah?
So what are you doing?
Just sitting around, chilling, you know? Hanging around.
So you're just going to stay there all day?
Yeah, probably. Probably. I got nothing much else to do, you know?
Just never can tell. Something might come up.
Well, something might. Those pictures that you sent, those were pretty hot.
Oh, did you like them?
Yeah, I sure did. I sure did. You have any more?
What did you like?
I liked every bit of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Every bit.
Could it have possibly been because a pedophile is an awkward person and did not know how to have a conversation?
That's why we have to talk about it from the perspective of ethics and building a case. So, like, while we know that this is all true, in order to get it to fly through court, that's why she was able to sue. And they even bring up later that they ran mock trials where Dateline, because they were getting sued, they were running a mock trial and they won twice. But if they take it to court, then Dateline has to pay out of pocket for fees and stuff like that. If they settle out of court, it's handled by their insurance company. So he even, Chris Hansen brings up in the podcast that he wanted to go to court, but at the end of the day, everybody became more comfortable with just settling it because that was the easiest, smoothest, be like water way out of the situation. They bring up that the Murphy County Police, they were dropped from the lawsuit, and so was Chris Hansen. And a lot of the information that people pull from is from Esquire. And take this with a grain of salt. He says that ABC also wrote an article and that they were like hit pieces because they were trying to get perverted justice to work for them. And so a lot of the information you read from those articles isn't true. And going back to the 23 men that were also arrested, the DA refused to prosecute any of those cases after that, citing the evidence that none of the suspects were in Collin County at the time, so he had no jurisdiction, which doesn't make any sense, though, just like Kevin Carter said, because he was at the Sting House, right? If he was at the Sting House acting as liaison between the police department and To Catch a Predator, and he was the one deciding if they could get arrested or not, the house is in Murphy. Murphy's in Collin County. They did go there in an attempt to meet up with an underage person. They had committed a crime that was under their jurisdiction. And so you're left with who's telling the truth. I tend to lean more towards Hansen and and Kevin Carter.
I do too. I could agree with that.
And it appears to be like a cover up, or not a cover up, or like a sweep it under the rug, whether it's for PR or it's because somebody knew somebody.
I mean, having a pedophile DA is pretty bad PR.
It's really bad PR, when it comes time to run for a re-election and stuff like that. It paints a bad picture. So I can see it from that perspective, but also it's like, shouldn't justice be
served if that's what your job is?
Yeah, and if you are a prosecutor, should you not be held to a higher standard?
Yeah, you should know more than anyone else wrong from right at that point.
And like, how many people had he put away for that same crime? Because he was a prosecutor, and they said he was a good one. They said that this dude had like a photographic memory of the law, which is weird because at the end of the day, he was one of the biggest perpetrators of this crime.
All right, so there's actually another layer to this whole story. Another official actually got caught up on some bullshit because of To Catch a Predator.
Yeah, they bring it up on the podcast, and they bring up that information with the suicide of William Conradt may have directly led to the prosecution of Galen Sumrow, who was the Rockwall County District Attorney, who would have therefore been William Conrad's direct superior. The theory is, and it's a theory because I say theory because it was in the podcast, and it's kind of alluded to. Even during the prosecution, the judge that convicts Sumrow brings up William Conrad. Mm-hmm. He says that he wishes he could be here to stand trial, but he obviously took the easy way out. But he got caught embezzling money. And Kevin Carter within the podcast says that, I think he may have referenced it wrong, but he calls it fruit of the poisonous tree, where they found information for another crime while investigating this crime.
That's true. That is definitely a thing. It's like you can't go farther than the parameters of your investigation. So say you're pulled over and your car doesn't smell like weed or anything like that, and you haven't done anything, all you did was speed. They need something to enhance it. They need reasonable, articulable suspicion that another crime has taken place or that something else is going on deeper than what the initial look-in was for.
Okay. And that's what he refers to it as. And he did get prosecuted, and he did spend time in federal prison. And it's implied that it did directly come from this case. It's also worth noting, and I think it kind of goes back to the DA earlier not wanting to prosecute. Like I said, we can't say with conviction. The Rockwall District Attorney's embezzlement may have been a reason that the Collin County District Attorney did not want to prosecute or did not want this case looked into from the beginning when the police chief was ready to kind of do this whole perverted justice to catch a predator thing. He may have been aware. Can't say that for certain, but he may have been.
What a safe feeling knowing these people are protecting us and running our government.
Yeah, and even within the podcast itself, they said that it seemed pretty clear that To Catch a Predator up until that point had never really run into any resistance. This was the first time that they had run into resistance, and it was, in their opinion, due to corruption, just kind of rampant corruption, and it was unfolding essentially just right in front of them. And so the pushback from this city of Murphy was so strong that at a city council meeting, basically the whole town came up with like a "Don't Mess with Murphy" slogan, and their idea was that To Catch a Predator being there was drawing in predators or doing something like that.
I get where they're coming from somewhat, but I also don't, because at the end of the day, they're still getting predators off the street. So in my eyes, it should still be a positive thing.
Yeah, you could always argue that they already existed there. Mm-hmm. So some of the town, a small portion, argued that they were already here. And, we talked about the text chats earlier, supposedly in the 700s. And so this is actually where William Conrad's sister started kind of making a huff and saying that Dateline NBC was directly responsible for the death of her brother, that their actions directly led to his suicide, which isn't necessarily what I believe or what most, I think, people that have really researched this case believe.
I think he was just trying to do the world a favor.
Well, this leads into another important part of it, in that they seized his computers, and they did find pornographic material on his computer and on his cell phone. So according to Kevin Carter, and Chris Hansen kind of agrees with him, the reason that he did kill himself was because they caught him before he could erase all the data. His plan to begin with. They could have moved in on Monday, but he might not have been there. He might have been out of the country. He might have deleted all the information. They basically think that because they caught him and he knew what the outcome was going to be, not only is he going to be caught with child porn, but possibly get his boss in trouble, he just chose to end his life right there. Mm-hmm. That's what I tend to believe, because that makes more sense.
All in all, this kind of just made things go downhill, and with all that controversy now, they were kind of ad sponsorships got harder for them to get. The money flow wasn't coming in as much. And not only that, the show was getting increasingly more expensive to produce. And it was one of, if not the most expensive show that Dateline had. All of that in combination with that fat lawsuit you were talking about kind of is what caused To Catch a Predator to essentially come to an end.
Yeah, if not spread itself into several smaller projects that kind of dealt with more specific things. You know, like Chris Hansen himself says that they weren't over after that. They continued to make money. They dealt with the settlement because that was the easiest way to deal with it. But at the end of the day, that it left a bad taste in their mouth. And that's probably directly led to why we don't see it in its original incarnation. Because we saw it run that way for 4 straight years.
But now we have all these spin-offs. We had Gideon recently bust EDP.
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty cool. We have several other channels. There's 2 I'm thinking of. Shumba, do you have the names of the 2 that are rather prevalent?
Like you had spoken about, Gideon and Skeeter Gene actually just recently did the Bust on EDP 445 that we had covered just a little bit ago. Skeeter Gene, more so than Gideon, seems to be making a larger portion of his content about this style of catching predators, which isn't necessarily bad. My only question is everything on the up and up, right? Because there were a couple more channels. People vs. Preds is one of the bigger ones. Multiple people have seen the video of the Asian gentleman that was essentially claiming that he was at the store trying to get anal cream or something like that.
Hemorrhoid cream, I believe.
Right. Unfortunately, that channel isn't around anymore. And there are a couple more notable ones. 561 PC is one of them, and Protect the Innocent is another one. Protect the Innocent is different than the rest of them, though, because they have a lot of disclaimers on their videos stating that this is more so how To Catch a Predator first started in their first and second season before they started working with the police. They're claiming that a lot of this really is just documentary stuff, and I think that might be out of fear of liability in any of these cases. But
so my only issue with that is, right, is this for content's sake, for self-serving purposes, or is this to simply actually get these people caught up? Are they actually trying to get these kinds of people out of the community, or is this just clout-hungry demons? The idea of what they're doing is good, don't get me wrong, but is it selfish intent at the end of the day and not really actually trying to make forth an effort to get these people off the street?
Right, and I feel like a lot of that comes down to how they go about their stings, because I've personally seen a few of these videos to where they have these conversations with these alleged predators, and then they themselves, without contacting the police, go out and try to essentially grill the suspect, and then they contact the police afterwards. Now, even though they contact the police and a lot of these people get arrested, I wonder how many of them actually lead to full convictions, because I'm concerned that they might be mishandling evidence, might be doing things to where the case makes it more difficult.
Not only that, a lawyer can argue evidence tampering just off the rip because they don't know where it was before. So any good lawyer is going to argue that there was evidence tampering in there and that, you know, their client's being wrongly convicted of a heinous crime.
Exactly. So like you said, they're trying to do the right thing. And I feel like some of them, now this isn't all the channels, some of them really are working with the police. I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but one of them does operate the same way that To Catch a Predator did, to where they contact the police in advance. They have them sitting outside of a bait house that they have set up. Then they have people coming in, and then as they're leaving, they get arrested and grilled further there.
I would say broadcasting it on YouTube is probably not the best way. So I think you'd have to divide it into percentages. That I think these are media personalities, and they wouldn't put it on YouTube, and they wouldn't do this if they weren't trying to get money. Mm-hmm. And Dateline itself had to operate off of revenue and Nielsen ratings, and like you said, eventually the production became too
a crazy amount.
Too crazy, yeah. Where you're not going to turn. So if it is for clout, it's at least on an operational capacity. At least you need money in order to fund these things, to pay for employees and stuff, and then obviously to live. But would it work better if you really were about just after justice? Would it work better to collect the information and discreetly pass it on to police from that point to do a bust or do this thing the appropriate way? Like you said, introducing a third party, a defense lawyer is probably going to be like, wow, thank you. I'm glad you did that. Because now they can argue that harassment, coercion. So I think it's an ethical gray area, but I think it's a good thing that it happens, because it's like having a scarecrow on the side of the road. Maybe you don't always want it there, but it does keep the people away. Those people on the streets that are into that type of thing, they know that people are out there pretending to be kids.
With that being said, do you guys miss To Catch a Predator? Do you think they overstepped boundaries? Do you think they were in the right? What punishment should be done for predators? What do you guys think? Also, let us know what you guys think about these new YouTubers that are kind of riding the wave of To Catch a Predator. Was EDP really just after a cupcake? Let us know down in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. With that being said, I'm Rugburn.
And I'm Pickled Landon.
And this is Tombstone Tourist.